Welcome to Aging on the Suncoast. I'm your host, Jason Martino. The United States Department of Justice reports that 1 in 10 seniors aged 60 and over will experience some form of abuse. Even more startling is about 1 out of every 23 cases of abuse goes unreported. Cognitive decline appears to be a big risk factor for elder abuse and financial exploitation. Unfortunately, seniors who are victims of abuse are more likely to be institutionalized than those who have not been abused. This month's show is intended to dig deeper into elder abuse, neglect, exploitation, and consumer fraud. While these topics are not positive in nature, our intent is to inform our viewers that this is real and it affects the lives of our most vulnerable. To help us understand these issues, we've invited to our show Mike Mahoney with the Florida Department of Children and Families and Anna Marie Millett with Pinellas County Consumer Protection. Together, these two seasoned individuals will shed light on some serious topics that unfortunately have prevalence in Pinellas and Pasco counties. Mike, welcome to the show, or more, I probably should say, welcome back to the show. You were here with us last year, and we really appreciate your attendance.
I'm glad to be back. Thanks for having me back, Jason.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
No problem. So let's set the stage. Let's talk about definitions. I know that you work with a lot of different definitions through your agencies, the Florida Department of Children and Families. And one of the definitions that we'd like for our viewers to know about is what is abuse? How does the state define what abuse is?
Yes. And before we talk about it, we'll just make sure we preface it with the fact that all of these are in Chapter 415 of the Florida statutes. Chapter 415 is the statute that governs everything DCF does. Okay. So you can, if anybody wants to ever look these up in their entirety, because some of them are long. So what we'll do is some keywords on definitions.
Sure, yeah.
So when we think of abuse, we're thinking of either a willful act or it could be a threatened act that leads to the harm of the individual. And then with DCF, we're talking about vulnerable adults. We go way below 60 all the way to 18, as long as you're a vulnerable adult, which is somebody who basically suffers from some kind of impairment, a qualifying impairment where they can't take care of themselves in some way. You have to think about who. What are the key words to who can abuse? This is a relative. Any relative could be charged with abusing a vulnerable adult. It could be specifically a caregiver or somebody that lives in the home with this individual. It wouldn't be someone like a neighbor that doesn't provide any care, that is not related to the individual. And somebody 18 or older can be abused by a caregiver, household member, or a relative. And it can be a willful, purposeful act, or it can be a threat. That's considered abuse.
Well, thanks for defining that. I thought it would be nice to kind of set the stage of how the state sees that definition. And a couple more definitions. We hear the term neglect and self-neglect. And I wonder if you just shed some light on the definitions of both those terms, neglect and self-neglect. And then if you can help us understand what distinguishes one between the other.
Sure. When you think of neglect, you think of somebody who is not getting, doesn't have their needs met. So in the statutes, the key words are a failure to provide whatever, or an omission to do that. When we talk about neglect with DCF investigations, we're talking about when you have a caregiver specifically who is not providing care to the individual, failing to do something that person needs, help them bathe or take medication. Self-neglect, which is the most common report we get to the Florida Abuse Hotline with DCF, self-neglect is when you are responsible for your own care and you're not taking care of yourself. You may not bathe anymore. You may not take medicine. And, some of our population, they don't want to take medicine, and we investigate that and try to help if we can.
So many choices people have to make, either on the good side or the bad side, and for the self side of things too. Right. Exploitation, last definition, is one that you all use a lot as an agency that explores that. How does the state understand what exploitation is?
Exploitation we look at in two different ways. You can exploit someone, if you stand in a position of trust over that individual. So if you're trusted to manage their finances or manage their medications, you can exploit someone financially. You could take their money. You could take their property. You could take their medication. We do get reports about for exploitation where it's nothing to do with money. It's medications are being taken and that type of thing. So that's when somebody is basically responsible for you, for taking care of you. They're assigned to. It doesn't have to necessarily be a legal contract, but it's an understood agreement that they are your caregiver in some fashion. The other way to exploit somebody is when you deprive them of assets, or you have them engaged potentially in, say, a contract, and this person is not in a position of trust over you, but they should know that you lack what we call the capacity to consent. The capacity to consent is a foundation of what we do at DCF when we investigate the welfare of vulnerable adults. In the community, that's what people think of as competency. We don't deal in competency, we deal in capacity to consent, and the long version of that is the capacity to consent to services. We're a services agency, ultimately. The purpose of our investigation is to determine if the person is in need of our assistance and services. So you could exploit someone if you know they lack capacity, and you engage in that process anyway of selling them something or taking something from them.
Yeah, I appreciate your ability to highlight the the keywords. A lot of times our statutes are written in legal terminology, and it's not necessarily common terminology for everybody else. So I appreciate you breaking that down. Let's go back to abuse, and let's talk a little bit about the types of abuse that you see within our community. And I know that you operate within Pinellas and Pasco County. What do you see? What types of abuse are out there?
Well, just kind of the general types of abuse. We all think of physical abuse, and that might be when somebody has an injury of some kind. They might have bruises, they might have burns on them, maybe marks from being tied up. There's also mental abuses. Think of that as like psychological or emotional abuse. We kind of have a catch-all term for that mental abuse, and that is basically when you are making that person feel when you are making them feel that it's hard to put into words what that emotional abuse does to somebody, but they're just not, they're sad, they're scared, those types of things.
It has long-term effects.
Yes, it does. Yes, and it's the hardest to actually find. Yeah. It's very easy to see a bruise. It's not hard to see what's happening in somebody's head and how they might be made to feel by that, we'll say, perpetrator.
Yep.
There are things that we might look for, though.
All right. So we talked about the physical and the emotional and financial. Is there any kind of?
Well, that's the thing about it. We all think about abuse. All the things that we investigate, you can think about as some kind of abuse. We specifically define abuse in those ways, mental abuse or physical abuse, but abuse is the catch-all term for all of those things: exploitation, neglect, self-neglect, and the actual abuse. When we think about abuse, we really think about all those things together. But sure, exploitation, it's a kind of abuse.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're all happening at the same time. You can have an individual that is being exploited by, let's say, a caregiver, or they don't get their medications. They're not giving them a bath. Maybe they also hurt them sometimes. You could have all of it happening at the same time.
A trifecta of negativity.
Yes.
Yeah. So you, in your line of work and your experience with DCF and coming on to cases of abuse on there, you probably have seen some well-known characteristics of abusers. Would you like to elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, what's hard to do is to try to describe the characteristics of an individual who might do it, because they come into different, they're from different cultures and backgrounds and economic situations. What's easier is just to say who is it in general, and statistics show that when we're talking about abuse, any of the maltreatments that we investigate, when we're talking about a verified finding of abuse or neglect or exploitation, one third of the time it's always a son or a daughter.
Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
1/3 of the time.
That's a
It's
shame.
overwhelmingly large percentage is the children.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then that's in an in-home investigation. And DCF does investigate in-home investigations and institutional investigations. So we will go into nursing homes and assisted living facilities, family care homes, and we'll investigate. In the home environment, it's the son or the daughter 1/3 of the time. The next highest percentage, about 1/5 of the time, a little less than that, it's a provider that's coming in to help the victim.
Yeah, and I remember from last year that you told me that, moreover, cases of abuse are coming from the community versus some of the institutions that we deal with, the assisted living facilities and skilled. Let's stay on the track of statistics. How big is this problem? I mean, can you give us anything for the local level or in the statewide level?
Yep, statewide in the last fiscal year, I have to bring those statistics because
No.
I'm getting older, can't remember.
Good for you.
For the last fiscal year, there were 52,858 reports to the state of Florida abuse hotline.
That's unbelievable.
And in Pinellas County, 3,480 specific to Pinellas County. Pasco County, 1,584. So a lot. That's a lot. 50,000 reports a year. And I don't have the statistic handy, but I remember a few months ago I saw one where our abuse hotline, say 10 years ago, received about 10,000 reports a year. So clearly we're getting more of them.
Yeah.
It's definitely a major increase.
And your keyword was that those were the ones that were reported. But is there
Right.
still a problem with under-reporting out there?
Yes, well, nationally, recent statistic nationally, 1 out of 10 adults in the United States, elders, is abused. In Florida, we have about 4% on average of our population that is reported to the Florida Abuse Hotline, rather than 10%. So there's a 6% difference there. In Pinellas County, historically, we get about 20% of the population is involved in our reporting process. So higher in Pinellas County.
Okay. So if I suspect abuse in my family or maybe a neighbor or something of that nature in their family, what do I do?
You can call the Florida Abuse Hotline.
Okay, we're going to run a graphic on those numbers in between the segments.
I don't have to remember the phone
No,
number.
don't do it.
You can also fax the report in. The phone number is open 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. 7 days a week. It just doesn't ever close, so you can always call. You can fax the report in. Sometimes the situation doesn't warrant a call. You can write it down and fax it. You can also go online, and I think you'll probably post that too. I'm not sure, but you can Google that and find it. You can go online and just do an online report.
Okay.
We make it easy.
Yeah, we're starting to run out of time for the segment, but do tell us, if I were to make a report, what are some of the things that I would need to have available?
You want to definitely have the location of the victim, who they are, where they are, what has happened to them, what other people are involved, specifically an alleged perpetrator. One of the biggies is obviously what's happened to the individual. One of the biggies is what dangers are there to the investigator. People have guns, they have dogs, they have snakes, they have different things that crawl around. We need to know, what's the danger to the investigator. And reporters do enjoy anonymity. It's kept confidential. It's a third-degree felony for an investigator to disclose the identity of a reporter, so they never do.
Good point. Mike, it's wonderful having you back on our show. Hopefully you'll come on next year in whatever capacity you're in with DCF, and we've enjoyed and I've learned a great deal today.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem. Please stay with us while we take a short break. As usual, don't forget to have our pen or pencil ready. During the break and at the end of our show, we'll be running contact information for available resources. When we come back, we'll explore the issue of consumer fraud.
Many of us don't want to believe that elder abuse, neglect, or exploitation can happen to a family member, a friend, or even ourselves. Elder abuse is a growing problem and is severely underreported. Many victims are reluctant to report due to fear, embarrassment, shame, or guilt. In order to prevent elder abuse, we must take action. Don't be afraid to talk about the issue and report it to the Florida Abuse Hotline at 1-800-962-2873. Together, we can make a difference.
Welcome back. During the first segment of today's show, we talked about elder abuse, neglect, and exploitation. We now understand what to look for and how to report it. During the second half of our show, we brought back Anna Marie Millett from Pinellas County Consumer Protection. So let's examine consumer fraud and the resources available within our community. Anna Marie, welcome back to our show. Similar to Mike, you were on last year and you provided some great information. That's why I invited you back so we can continue that.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
No problem. So earlier in the show, Mike from the Department of Children and Families, he gave some definitions of abuse and neglect and exploitation. And I know that you deal a lot in your business with exploitation. What types of exploitation do you deal with the Pinellas County Consumer Justice?
Well, as he explained, there's different types. We primarily see financial exploitation, and this can be through different ways. One is an unknown party or stranger. They may contact the victim just through a phone call, and they're running some type of scam. It may be somebody unsolicited who just knocked on their door. Now they're trying to sell or offer some kind of services to them. There's also the business or professional party where the victim looks at them because they are a professional in their industry, whatever that may be. So now they can convince them to maybe take out a reverse mortgage or put money into investments with unrealistic returns. And then finally, the trusted party. This could be a family member, a neighbor, a friend, somebody who already has that trust from the victim, and the victim now gives them authorization to oversee their assets and their finances and other matters in their life.
Yeah, again, with the keywords, trusted individual. That was what Mike highlighted a little bit earlier. You're dealing with the same idea that way.
Exactly.
So let's talk about red flags. A lot of times there's red flags out there that can kind of keen people in to what's happening. What are red flags that you see in your world?
One is, like I mentioned, the parties. When that unknown party or that stranger all of a sudden now becomes a trusted party very quickly, and the victim's referring to them as, this is my friend, or they help me with things. Just that shift in position usually is a red flag. Also, if the victim was able to meet, because they're financially stable, to meet their monthly obligations, whether it's buying groceries, pay their bills, go to the doctors, and now all of a sudden that's changed for some reason. They still have the income, but they're not meeting those monthly obligations. Or the opposite, where now that trusted party is getting luxurious gifts. It might be the grandson just got a brand new sports car, or they've never sailed or had interest in boating, but now the victim has a brand new boat. And there's really no explanation. They say, I don't know, they're handling my finances, or they said they wanted this or needed it. But there's really no good reason for why all of a sudden this spending has increased.
It always puts a pit in my stomach when we do this show. It's never my favorite topic, and I always want to cover this topic, but I always feel so horrible hearing about some of these things that occur within the county or even in the state. So if back to examples, if I suspected that somebody, a close neighbor of mine, was being exploited by somebody, what do I do? Do I report that, obviously, right?
You can contact our department. We do like to have the victim file a complaint, but we understand that isn't often easy to get them to do so. I hear a lot of times consumers say they're embarrassed, or because of their age, I should have known better. Our department is complaint driven, but we realize the importance of being proactive. So we have a big outreach department, and we do a lot of presentations. And with every presentation we give, I always give my direct number should they feel more comfortable contacting me to discuss the matter, or I'll spend time after the presentation to do one-on-one. We emphasize, please don't be embarrassed, contact us so we can look into it. What you think might be the issue, there might be other levels of it that we need to look into. Yeah,
and to plug one of our programs with the Area Agency on Aging, Pasco and Pinellas County, we have a victim advocate program too. I know that in the past that we've assisted consumers or residents with the filing of that report. Let's shift gears a little bit to Pasco County, which is a little bit different than Pinellas. But if I was a Pasco County resident, how would I report exploitation as well? Would it just be simply through the hotline, the statewide hotline?
Well, that is one way. Another is to go through your local police department. Currently, Florida has 7 consumer protection agencies. So areas such as Pasco that don't have one, that would be the option, either to go through the abuse hotline or to go through their local law enforcement department. And each agency is going to handle complaints differently. They're going to investigate different matters and also regulate different areas. So it is going to vary. So I think we're very fortunate to have a consumer protection agency to assist the residents in such matters.
Okay. So back to Pinellas County. If I suspected exploitation and I knew that your number, which we're going to run at the end of the show and during the break, and I felt that I needed to make a report, what can I expect from making a report with your agency?
Definitely. Well, there's some requirements. We do need to have a written complaint. It cannot be anonymous, so we need the contact information of the individual filing the complaint as well as who the complaint is against. The subject of the complaint, who the complaint is filed against, will be notified that there is a complaint and will be asked to respond to the complaint. There's a review process, and it will be determined whether the complaint is civil in nature or criminal, and then assigned to an investigator in that section. From there on out, that person will work with that investigator from start to finish. So if they have any additional documents, questions, want to update, that's the person that they would contact, and the investigator will be in touch with both parties as well to reach resolutions. If it's civil, we work through mediation with the parties, and if it's criminal, the investigators work with the state attorney's office for prosecution.
Okay. And you got a lot of busy things going on over there, but your triage process sounds pretty deliberate, most likely because a lot of cases fall into the criminal nature of it versus the civil of it. And I imagine as an agency like yourselves, you really can't do it alone. You probably have to use different partners to accomplish a lot of your mission and your goals. Tell us about your partnerships.
Oh, they're very important, and we work closely with a lot of agencies, from Area Agency on Aging, DCF, law enforcement, a number of agencies. And oftentimes we're looking at different things. There's a lot of regulatory agencies, so if we receive a complaint that is regulated, as a courtesy we provide them a copy of the complaint to look at it administratively while we still work it locally with the parties. So same with law enforcement. If they go out on a call, it's a civil matter, they have our agency as a referral. So instead of saying we can't help you, they say this is the agency that can. So those partnerships and working together is vital for everybody involved, and also to provide the best service for those residents.
Yeah, the same with us, really. The Area Agency on Aging can't do it by ourselves, and that's why we link and we partner with you all to accomplish a lot of the same mission that we have. Our Victim Advocate program, I know, can't really assist that person unless it's a criminal side of that case. And just if you don't mind, I'll plug a couple of different things that we do. We can, if court has to come into the picture, we can educate that person on the judicial process, and we can also attend court proceedings with and or on their behalf. It's a really neat program, and I'm always learning something new about this program. So,
and if I may, also the assistance of your agency through the criminal process. Some of our victims wouldn't proceed had it not been for your advocates, and also it helps them to go through it and, you know, to be comfortable with the process. So it is very important, from filing the complaint to going to the finish line.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying those things. The one of the things that I've learned too is that a lot of times an individual will come to us with a very specific problem, an issue like exploitation. They'll come to your agency, and a lot of times you see that there's also a need for wraparound services in addition to dealing with just the initial reason why they showed up at your door or wrote their actual report. And I think that's where we are very symbiotic and we work very well together, is that we can complement each other with the neat things that we do. So, so let's just say that now I've submitted a written report, and you've done the triage process by either determining if it's civil or criminal, or maybe even both. So what are my expectations? What's next for me to do? What should I expect to happen during an active case?
Well, if it is civil, like I said, the investigators are certified mediators with the Supreme Court of Florida. They work with the parties through mediation. That could be a telephone conference, it could be in office, or sometimes at the home to reach a satisfactory resolution. So they do keep in touch with the parties, and they walk you through the process, and hopefully at the end have a resolution for you. With the criminal side, they're going to prepare the reports. They're going to be in touch with all the parties, whether it's witnesses, victims, subject, and get all those statements, prepare the report for the state attorney's office. And again, they're there with the victim from start to finish through the whole process, and if necessary, when it goes to court.
And I guess, just being reasonable, that because cases can be either very complicated or they can be very cut and dry, that the time it takes for some resolution probably varies a great deal. I mean, have you seen, what's the span of how long it may take? And it probably depends on the supporting documentation and whatever facts that come to the table, too. Is that correct?
Yes. I mean, once the complaint is filed, with the complaint, if they can provide supporting documentation, whether it's proof of payment, contracts, any information they have, it does make the investigation easier instead of having the investigator have to request it or even subpoena the information. But with majority of the criminal cases is unlicensed contracting, and the statute of limitation is 2 years. So they do have that time frame. It doesn't always take that long, but the investigations can take quite a bit of time depending on the issues of the matter and how easy it is to work with the parties and get that information together.
Yeah, that sounds pretty logical, and it sounds like it's just another expectation that somebody should know. That when they contact your agency, that in addition to the report, that they need to have some supporting information to help out with your investigation of it too. Scams are rampant around the world. It's not just isolated to Pinellas and Pasco County. It's statewide. It's nationwide. What's some of the new emerging trends that you see right now in the month of June?
Big is telephone scams. The three main ones are the computer tech. They call to repair your computer. Imposter scams. They're law enforcement. They're the IRS. They're going to arrest you. And then also the grandparent scam. They claim to be a grandchild and they've had some kind of emergency. But now with the good weather coming along, you're going to get also some door-to-door solicitation. It's not your encyclopedia salesperson. It's not your vacuum cleaner salesperson like you used to be back in the day. So consumers, no matter what age, have to be very careful answering that telephone, opening that door to a stranger, because what their intentions are, what they're asking you may not be factual or true, and they're very easily fallen for a scam.
Yeah, you know, we do a great deal of education to seniors and just older adults in general about not always trusting somebody that approaches with a smile and asks for information that you think is just kind of benign. And I've seen in a lot of cases when I've talked to people about legitimate things that we need from them that I've been questioned for getting that information, and I'm very proud of that. That means that I think your message is going out to the public, and mine is as well. And Anna Marie, we loved having you on the show. You were here with us last year, and hopefully you can join us in the following year. And you put out some great information, and you guys just do a wonderful job with what you do. Yep.
Appreciate
Thank you for coming back on.
you.
We hope you learned a great deal from this month's broadcast. We also hope this episode helped you understand that the issues we speak to today are very real, and there are resources available if you are a victim or know someone who is. At the end of the show, we'll highlight those resources again. So get your pencil ready. We'll see you next month, and until then, please maximize all the opportunities life avails you.
Many of us don't want to believe that elder abuse, neglect, or exploitation can happen to a family member, a friend, or even ourselves. Elder abuse is a growing problem and is severely underreported. Many victims are reluctant to report due to fear, embarrassment, shame, or guilt. In order to prevent elder abuse, we must take action. Don't be afraid to talk about the issue and report it to the Florida Abuse Hotline at 1-800-962-2873. Together, we can make a difference.